This style of video is going to be a little different. I'm actually going to be ranking all of the cameras that I have pretty much ever used, aside from maybe one or two that I've completely forgot about, which would not be important. So, if you guys don't know, I actually started on YouTube in about 2015. I started with I believe it was an autograph collecting channel. So, here it is. First ever video, I believe, is this one.
This video, and it is a 6 package TTM day.
So again, first one you saw, iPhone 3. Now it's gonna sit at D for now, D tier. S tier is honestly like favorite camera I've ever used. A tier is, excellent. I'd recommend it. B tier is I've used it. It's good, has some quirks. C tier is, if I have to use it occasionally, it's okay. D tier is let's not use it again. So I'm gonna have to throw the iPhone 3, unfortunately, into the D tier. Not that again, it wasn't an amazing camera to start with, but again, quality wasn't good. If you threw it at me today, probably wouldn't use it. We actually still have this phone just saved in our house to date. So that's what I started filming YouTube videos on. The next one is the GoPro Hero 4 Silver. Now, some of these in the beginning, I might have jumbled up a little bit, but most of these are in the order that I used it. Again, that first video, 2015, is 9 years ago, which means I would be 12 years old. So this is everything I've used from 12 years old to 21 years old. Is the GoPro Hero 4 Silver. Now, I started this. I'm going to see if I have a video. I believe. All right, this is the video. My face cam does not show up when I'm on these social media pages, so just letting you know. So here's some cringe for you. This is the GoPro Hero 4 Silver.
And today, I'm going to give you just a quick announcement on a couple things. I am working on it's not really big, but it's a video that takes a while to edit.
I'll be honest, I don't even show my friends stuff like that. Hardly my girlfriend has seen it. So, Hero 4 Silver, again, I think the thing was once you hit, I believe, the GoPro Hero 5, 6, 7, stabilization gets better. I think it might have actually had 4K options, but I'm sure I was just filming 1080p. Again, this was, I believe, the Hero 4 was the last one before they actually got good. I think they made improvements when the GoPro hit the Hero 5. And I'm going to throw that at C tier. Again, if someone threw it at me and I had to use it a couple times, it's okay. One of my original channels again, I just vlogged with it back then, but I would put it on a chest mount and I would go fishing. So I would get some fishing clips. That's one of my original channels, which is called Fishvisions, which is still live on YouTube today. And not really much I've done with it in the past year or so. But Fishvisions, I had one channel that was even earlier that actually got deleted by YouTube. Long story, nothing terrible, but it was unfortunate. Oh gosh, the vlogging legend. Again, because I said I started off as a YouTube vlogger, and now I'm 21 years old, growing my video agency. But currently, I guess you could consider me a videographer. I think this was from the very original Fish Visions channel, the one with 1,000 subscribers that got deleted. And so, what's crazy about this one, this was during the time of YouTube where people either had a G7X, a G7X Mark II, only the Mark II was out, and I believe that Canon 80D just came out. That was the Casey Neistat era where these were the cameras Jake Paul was using, his friends were using, everyone in the YouTube industry was using. So the G7X original, maybe if you don't remember, actually the microphone on it, because it only had this flip up screen, the microphone was right here, kind of in the middle. It was just kind of like two dots. So a lot of times people would actually get very windy audio if they were outside. So what you actually had to do, because you couldn't attach a microphone to that camera, is you actually used, what's it called? Not the not Velcro. I guess it is kind of a Velcro. I'm gonna see, what is that. Let's just call it a Velcro, not the soft side that you would stick it to the prickly side, but the little prickly ones that you'd stick something onto. can't believe I literally just talked to my dad about this last week. And so what you would do is you would take little strips of that Velcro and you would put it in a little rectangle around the microphone holes. Then you would grab a piece of like fur, like from a store, and you would attach the non-prickly part of the Velcro. You would like glue that to the piece of fur, and you would basically have a piece of fur sitting on top of the microphone, and it's just kind of velcroed to it. So that's how people actually made a DIY wind muffs on the G7X original and the Mark II. So that one was actually a big one for me, my first real camera. And we actually sold it on eBay. We got scammed. We were like sending it to one guy in Mexico. We shipped the camera out, but then last second we checked, and somehow eBay said everything went through, but then later it said the payment like didn't come through or there was an error. So we basically ran out of all the money, probably the 400 or 500 bucks that camera was at the time. Which brings me to the next camera, which these two I'm kind of cross between which one I got first. But for Christmas one year, oh, sorry, would I rank the G7X a B tier? I think if it's better than the GoPro Hero 4, then the G7X can be considered a B tier beginner's camera. With my experience with it, it had, again, you couldn't plug the microphone into it, but at the time it was amazing. Next up is this camera, which is the GoPro Hero 4, same one, black. GoPro Hero 4 black. So if you didn't know why I have this photo, is because, again, it still didn't have great stabilization, but what the GoPro Hero 4 Black looked like was this. This is one of the versions of the GoPro Hero 4 Black, where it did not have a screen to it. And if you wanted a screen, you would have had to buy that little screen to click onto the back. And my parents originally bought me the one without the back. Then I was like, I really can't use it or see myself check the footage without a screen, which was like an extra $100 or something like that. So we did it, and I had to get even more extended casings to still use it for fishing videos. But that's really what I used it for. I asked for the Hero 4 Black because the Black, I believe, had 4K. I think if the silver just had 1080p, the Black was the 4K upgrade. I'm going to still throw that at C tier. Again, wasn't very upgraded besides the fact it had better quality. So I'm going to keep it same tier. Next one is my first more professional camera, which is the Canon M50. Am I going to keep it at A? Maybe. Let me just see what I think about it. This was pretty much the rig I had, which was the kit lens, which was a 15-45 adjustable aperture. It did have a hot shoe mount at the top, which is great because that's when I first got into buying a microphone. I bought the original Rode Go, I think that's what it is, and that's the setup I literally vlogged with. I will let you know, guys, that a lot of YouTube vloggers still vlog on this camera and the Canon M50 Mark II. It is still a very usable camera for anyone, especially if you can upgrade the lens. I think I ended up buying the Nifty 50, the super small one, which was probably 50 bucks as well. It was like a 50 millimeter 1.8. It was incredible because all these cameras, you never got a low aperture. But with that camera, I bought the Nifty 50 as well. And that's when I started working for my first ever 9 to 5 job. I guess it was a 7 to 3. And they let me also film videos for them. So that's why this camera was great. And I'm going to try to possibly throw in some footage from whenever these were shot. Hopefully, I have something. But that was the first one. My friend actually bought it before me for some reason because I think he wanted to stream or make YouTube videos as well. And then his dad bought this camera for him. Once I got used to it, I was like, this is a really small and lightweight camera. But at the end of the day, this is when you were picking between the M50 and the A6300 from Sony, the A6400, the A6500, and around the same time the A6600 just came out. But this one was a better deal. Canon luckily has a good menu system. It was just the one I went for, and I think I made the good choice because it had stabilization. The Sony cameras around that time didn't really have good stabilization. They were just starting to get their autofocus down, and sometimes that was when Sony was also known for not having great colors out of their camera or super vibrant. And at the time, I think I made a great choice because the vlogger that I admired most at that time for I admired for years and years, still do. Made a connection with him. I know him personally, Paul Cafaro. He started with this camera as well. He grew his channel, millions of subscribers, and he still uses the M50 or the M50 Mark II for a channel with millions of subscribers. So it's an amazing camera, has a special place in my heart. This one I should be able to grab some footage for. I believe I am going to keep it at A tier for any beginner, not an S tier camera, but for any beginner, I would definitely hand them this camera. Now, the next one, let me decide at the end where I'm going to place this one. This is the second, the Canon C100 Mark II. I never owned this camera, but shout out to my guy Maxwell who did. And he actually was great friends with my brother, and they were both heavily involved with our church's production. Now, I got my hands onto this camera around the time of COVID, and we actually were filming a lot more content for social media at that point. And what we used that camera for is we would film like worship days. So what we did, pretty much my brother and me, maybe one other production guy, younger at the time, would go to our church here, Cornerstone, in what is it, Brentwood, Oakley, Antioch, California. I think it's Brentwood. All these cities that I live by, their borders are so close to each other. And I would actually switch. We would have the C100 Mark II on a tripod. I would hold it occasionally, and I believe I used my Canon M50 and the with my nifty 50 lens as well. And we would film worship times that we would end up posting on Sunday, like worship things to keep people involved in the church still while, we were shut down. And we would also use that camera. I don't think we did any live streaming with that camera, but that's when we got very heavily into our church's live streaming. And so we would, again, play our worship videos sometimes that we filmed with this before we would transition it to it was all a live stream, but a pre recorded video played on the live stream. And then the pastor would preach his message for the high school. C100, an amazing camera. Now, I think this is honestly still a very good camera for today's day and age because you can get this as a whole kit for pretty much $1,000. And it is technically, I believe this one is Netflix certified. Actually, I don't think this one is. I think the cheapest Netflix certified is the C400 Mark III or something like that, or the C300 Mark IV. I don't know. But this was amazing. I believe it had 4K 30, 4K 24. Again, at the time, he had it for a little while, so this wasn't brand new by any means at the time. Again, this was 2020, which I can't believe is still almost 4 or 5 years ago now. But honestly, I love shooting this camera. The menu was a pain to go through by all means. I hardly understood it at that time. I was only 15, 16. But I loved being able at that age to hold a cinema camera that honestly had great 1080p. And that was the thing. I think for some reason, it was the 1080p was downscaled to 1080 in camera. So it was, 1080p, but a lot of people stretched it to a 4K timeline and it still looked great. I believe it had C-Log. I don't remember. I don't even know what options C-Log has now, whether it's 2, 3, whatever. This one did have very good and pretty snappy autofocus, actually, but it wasn't touchscreen. I think you could move the focus around, possibly, but it was not touchscreen. An amazing cinema camera. I'm going to be a little lenient on some of these because this is A tier for any vlogger, anyone who wants to get started. It's not A tier compared to the rest of the cameras that we're going to have. I believe this is going to be just my experience with it. I did not use this a ton. I used it occasionally. I'll still throw it up in A tier. I'll toss it up to A tier as kind of a number 2 on A tier because at the time I was using it, compared to the rest of the gear that I had used, was an amazing experience besides a pretty bad menu system. Now, again, I never owned this one officially, but the next one we have up is the Canon M6 Mark II. At the time, I owned the Canon M50, and I was trying to not spend a ton of money, but maybe an extra 300 and upgrade from something that only shot 1080p. It did shoot 4K, but it was like only 4K 24 and it had a massive crop. So I wanted something that didn't crop huge but shot like 4K 30, 4K 60, which is then when I decided to pick up the M6 Mark II, which I'm going to throw in B tier, which because it is technically the next upgrade from the M50 because very similar body styles. But again, the M50 had a slide out screen that came out to the right. This one has a slide up screen, which blocks your hot shoe mount right there. That was the first negative, but I think I still ended up using it. But one of my first good days using this camera, shooting 4K, my first good ever 4K camera, honestly, there was not a massive difference between the quality, but there was a little bit. Most of these are still using kit lenses, and I was at work with during my 7 to 3:30 job, and I was filming a longer shoot, and at some point I was filming long files. So these could have been 20, 30, 40 minutes. Once I hit that higher end mark, the camera overheated. Now I had hardly ever dealt with a camera that overheated. None of these really overheat. So that was my very first experience with a camera that overheated, which is why I'm going to throw it in B tier, which means I could suggest it to some people. But again, if you didn't shoot longer stuff, it's good. Inside would be good. Definitely more confident than something I would use occasionally if someone had to throw me it. Be a little more comfortable with this. Good Canon menu system, good autofocus still. It was just a disappointing upgrade because I wanted 4K after that first or second, 30, 40-minute recording. I kind of kept it low key, but, you know, I put it down for like 2 minutes and then I could film for 5 minutes and then it would overheat again. So it wasn't a great experience being about, I think I might have been 18 when I bought this camera. Now, the next one, because believe it or not, I sold this camera pretty damn fast because I did not like the overheating. And the next one to come up is the original Lumix S5, which I own personally. Now, during this original Lumix S5 at the time, this camera had pretty much just come out. And I was using it again for the same exact work. Now, I had kind of an inspiration. If you guys have ever seen this YouTube channel right here, which is Black Tip H, for as long as I can remember and still going on, the videographer and editor of that channel, his name is Davis Bennett. He's also filmed stuff for Jake Paul. He's filmed stuff with Dude Perfect. Dude Perfect and Black Tip H have collaborated. It's a massive channel, and he's gotten a lot of cool experiences. One of his cameras, I don't know if I'm going to be able to grab a shot of it at the time, but Davis was like the guy who owned the high end equipment. And what he used at the time, around probably when I was 19 or 18 when I met him, was because I was doing video work for one of his close friends in South Florida. He told me that they were using the Panasonic S1H, the original. They have not. I honestly can't wait if they have a Mark II. That thing needs a big upgrade. No, you knew Panasonic autofocus. That thing's gonna be crazy because that one is still Netflix certified, and he really inspired me to get into Lumix cameras, Panasonic cameras. and the S5 was an amazing one at the time. I believe it had a fan, which was beautiful. That's what I wanted. No overheating. 4K and real 4K. This SM6 Mark II was like fake 4K. It didn't look 4K. Real 4K. My first ever camera that filmed in a log format that I graded and got LUTs for myself. I was impressed very much by the stability of a Lumix camera, and I loved the colors. Did I properly know how to color grade? No, but I will try to still throw up some footage. It might be ripped off of YouTube, so it may not be the most quality, but this was before the S5 Mark II, which that camera implemented Lumix Panasonic's newest autofocus. This still had upgraded autofocus, but at that time, I believe I was looking into some Sony cameras, but I really was mesmerized by Lumix's colors even back then. And this is the exact rig I used. I used a 20 to 60 original and like a Rode Wireless Pro, sorry, a Rode Pro microphone at the top. This is an A tier camera, 100%. I used it at the time. The only thing that would keep it from S tier is if it had the better autofocus back then, but unfortunately it didn't. The second one had not come out. But the autofocus was not that bad. I was shooting a lot of stuff that was capturing video, and I did vlog with it. I'll actually try to throw up some vlogs. I believe this one was shot on some YouTube videos, and it was a beautiful camera, had beautiful colors, great dynamic range, beautiful camera altogether. Wasn't thrilled with the autofocus, but it was a lot better than the old Lumix autofocus. It's not that the autofocus didn't stick; it stuck, but it was usually pretty slow at some points. Sometimes it was amazing, but sometimes it was a little slow in certain transitions, especially if I was vlogging myself like this and then I needed to snap the camera back around and film something. At that point, when you kind of whip the camera, the autofocus did not snap like Sony or Canon's does. Definitely an A tier camera for sure. Now, the next camera is my first cinema camera, and it is the Sony FX30. Now, at some point, I don't remember if this is when I had my FX3 or my FX30, but at some point I did have the 11 millimeter lens on it. And then I think at one point I bought the 11 to 22 millimeter lens. And then what lens did I buy after that? Oh, I got the Sony APS-C lens, but it was a 16 to 55 or something like that. It was a great lens. And there's a good video on YouTube where I used this, and it was spectacular. Colors, everything. Obviously, cinema camera, FX line. I obviously knew of the FX3 because they came out about the exact same time, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe the FX30 came slightly after the FX3. I don't fully remember. So again, FX30 got a different lenses on it. I believe I don't remember if I bought an MKE 600 microphone for this camera's top handle. I think I did eventually, but for a long time, I just had a cage on it and I attached the Rode Pro Plus microphone to the shotgun microphone to the side of it. Again, I have that video filming with this camera, and I was amazed by the colors. I obviously knew the FX3 was better. I didn't even probably know how good 12,800 ISO was, because this one, the ISO, I believe, was 640 and 3200 native, something like that. So again, it wasn't crazy, but if you're not filming low light, this is definitely an A tier camera if you are not filming low light conditions. Put a 1.8 lens on it and it would be beautiful. At one point, actually, I want to say on the S5 II, I actually bought, because the autofocus wasn't good anyways, I bought an original Canon 70 to 200 2.8. That was my first ever 2.8 lens. And I adapted it to this camera, and it was pretty good. But again, low light wasn't great but loved this camera. But I loved this camera. And I actually owned that camera for a fair bit until I had the funds for an FX3. This one, again, I'm going to put it as an S tier camera. I believe the Sony FX3 is an S tier camera, even though this is only my experience ranking it. But this was an S tier camera for sure. Had a very similar image, but this is the camera that I actually just got stolen. I had three lenses. I still have my top handle. I had just bought two CF Express A cards, wasn't insured, so I'm all out on pretty much $10,000 worth of gear that was stolen. So again, if you want to contribute to that, there is a GoFundMe in the top of the description or somewhere in the description. I truly appreciate anything. Beautiful camera. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I currently had a Laowa 12 millimeter 2.8, a 55 millimeter 1.8, and a Sony Zeiss 16 to 35 f4. Beautiful combos, amazing camera. I have, because I'm soon going to purchase a new camera, because I would love to, because I'd love to just have my own camera again and not have to rent a bunch of gear. I considered the A7S III, the S5 Mark II X, which I love, but the 12,800, the S5 2X, I love that it has higher recording options. You can film to SSD. I loved that. And I love Lumix's colors. But with my job, I'm going to have to go away with something that I would love and maybe get that camera as a second or third camera. And I'm going to have to stick with an FX3 again. I need the fan. I love to import my own LUTs to it. That's really what I needed, and I'm already used to it. So that's it. S tier camera. And I'm going to put this next camera, I'm not quite sure yet, but it is a red Komodo X. At my church, I go to the Bay Church in the Bay Area, and we have multiple campuses all around. And at the main campus in Concord, we actually have about I think 4 or 5 red Komodos, all on new RF lenses, and it's an amazing camera. We're streaming these cameras. We have one on a massive tripod zoomed into the pastor while he speaks his entire message. We track him, and we have one on a slider, and we have, I believe, three other red Komodos on people we call runners, which is my favorite position to be when requested to volunteer. And that basically means you're on the ground floor catching wide close-up shots. One runner has a 50 millimeter Rokinon, one will have a 24 to 70, and one has a 16 to 35. And I love the 24 to 70, so versatile. Red Komodo, when used in the right conditions, is an S tier camera. A lot of people buy it and don't really know if it's actually right for them, but it is in some conditions. And church production, definitely a beautiful camera. We actually work a lot of all the runners who, this is all manual focus stuff. All the runners only can look through the LCD here. When you put a Shinobi on it, which we do have, it, like, we literally let like 14 to 16-year-old kids are runners holding a $10,000, rig. Our church loves to include anyone who wants to help. So, sometimes it gets heavy for if someone's younger and can't really hold it too stable when it has an entire monitor and a rig, because all these are V mount. But that's going to be my setup right here. Again, FX3, Red Komodo, S tier cameras, if used properly. Everything in A tier was beautiful. B tier, someone throws them to me, I'll shoot them. C tier, would prefer to not have to use. D tier, let's try not to use. So everyone, thank you again. This says 40 minutes, but it's going to be cut down a little bit more. That's why I tried to hide myself off in the camera so you couldn't actually see how long you were here. But this is all the cameras I've pretty much used and touched and filmed projects on. If you have any questions about any of this gear, give me, throw ask questions, but also I want to see people in this style of niche, the YouTuber vlogger. I want you guys to make this as well. Make tier lists of gear you've owned and used and rank it. I'm on tiermaker.com. So just make one like this, screen record, have a face cam. I'm using Loom to record this face cam and my screen. But that's pretty much it. This is probably going to be a hard recording to get off onto my computer because this is going to now load to a website. So have an amazing day. Make sure to subscribe down below because most of you aren't, but we've had some amazing videos so far. So thank you all for that. I will see you in the next one.